Let's talk about a purchase versus lease comparison and what doctors need to understand when they're comparing two options side by side. The first consideration is, what does it cost to get into the property? If a down payment is required as a portion of that loan, do you have the amount of money that's required? If it's a $2 million property and the lender's requiring 10%, do you have $200,000 to put as a down payment to get that loan? If you don't, then that becomes an option it's not a viable option. The next consideration is, what does it cost per month from a cash flow perspective? Meaning, what are you cutting a check for on the mortgage side? What are you cutting a check for on the lease side? And in both those scenarios, you've got to figure out not only the mortgage and the lease payment, but you've also got to figure out the amount of money that you're borrowing for the build out of both properties. It's not just the mortgage, it's the mortgage plus the build out plus the operating expenses. It's the lease payment plus the build out plus the operating expenses. What does that cost from a cash flow perspective each month? If the option to lease costs $5,000 and the option to purchase costs $13,000, do you have the ability to support those payment structures from a cash flow perspective? The next area you're looking at are, what are the tax deductions? How much do I get to deduct on the lease side? How much do I get to deduct on the purchase side? In a lease scenario, you get to deduct the entire lease payment and all the operating expenses. On the mortgage side, you deduct the interest payment, not the principal, but the interest, but you also get to depreciate the asset over a set period of time. Typically 39 years, but there's a way to speed up the depreciation. And so you get some additional deductions over here. What does it look like from an after-tax perspective? Because you could have a scenario where the lease payment costs $5,000 a month, the purchase costs $13,000 a month, but you're gonna pay a lot less in taxes because you receive more deductions on the purchase side, and so you'll pay the government less in taxes, but you might pay the mortgage or you might pay other costs that are higher. What's the effective cost of leasing versus purchasing after tax deductions? And the last one, and typically the one that gets the most attention, what is the principal pay down? If every month I cut a check for $5,000 over here to lease, but I receive nothing in return for it except for the ability to use a space, but there's no asset accumulation, there's no building of wealth. Over here I cut a check for $13,000, but I save a significant amount of money in taxes. And then in addition to that, every time I cut a check each month, $3,000 or $4,000 per month goes to pay down principal, and my net worth increases by $3,000 or $4,000 per month. And if you looked at an amortization schedule, the principal pay down increases every single month. So every month you're paying down more principal, your net worth is going up even greater on a monthly basis. That's a very attractive reason to purchase. You could have a scenario where leasing's $5,000 a month, purchasing's $13,000, but after you look at the cash flow, the tax deductions, the principal pay down, the effective cost of owning could actually be less than leasing, even though there is an $8,000 delta upfront from a cash flow perspective. Most people don't understand that, and you won't get there until you run a detailed purchase versus lease analysis, but that's part of the equation. Another question could be, is it worth paying more per month if at the end of 20 years you'll have an asset worth $2 million in addition to the asset of your practice? Most healthcare providers that own real estate end up selling the real estate for more than they sell their practice for. There's a lot of very significant reasons why purchasing commercial real estate makes a lot of sense. There's also a lot of reasons where leasing commercial real estate can make the most sense for your practice. It depends on the age of your practice. It depends on the actual demographics and what's happening in the local market or that area. It depends on your long-term exit strategy. There's a lot of reasons why leasing makes sense, where purchasing makes sense. You need to look at all your options. You need to look at multiple options in each category if you can. You need to negotiate simultaneously on multiple options, and you need to have an expert advisor help navigate and advise you in the process to ensure that you make the most favorable decision for your practice both now and in the future.